Well, hello everybody. Absolutely delighted to see you here. Tonight we're going to be celebrating the birth of Brigit, which is going to be happening on February the 1st. It's the time when she hangs her cloak on a sunbeam and reveals her full radiant self as the sun comes back. And we've got some great guests tonight. It's going to last about an hour and a half. We really would love your comments in the chat, but we'd really appreciate it if you saved them to have them in between stories and visualizations, just so that everybody can concentrate on the screen. So yes, the Goddess Lounge has been mentored by 18 Hours. It has funding from the Arts Council of England. And the idea is to discuss themes of migration, climate and gender, and to have a diversity of performers. And tonight we've got Clare Muirreann Murphy, who's a UK-Irish storyteller, zooming in from Bristol. We've got Sherry Robinson, cellist from Belfast. We've got Catherine Maguire, who is also Irish, but zooming in from Italy. We've got TAMAR ELUNED WILLIAMS, who's coming in from Cardiff in Wales, and FLEUR Shorthouse's with me in Brighton, not with me in Brighton, but also in Brighton. And just to say, if there's any lunacy storytelling audiences out there, it is the full wolf moon tonight, so you have permission to ow if you want to. Anyway, Brigit, let's go straight to her and the origins of this great goddess. As a general rule, the shorter the name, the older the goddess. So in the Neolithic they had names like Ma and but I imagine that before that they were simply the vowels, like Ah or the Ah of the birds, or the of the beasts, or the of this wild wind that we've got today. I'd like to tell you a story about the goddess Brigit, but she would also be known as Brida or or I. So let's summon her with the vowels. I o I o I o I I o Hi, I bride. I'm from paradise. In paradise we make love all time, with flesh in wild wind, with nose in sweet flower, with naked foot on wet earth. What source of this pleasure? I have water, I have tree, I have fire. One day I look into well, and I am waiting to hear song of my white snake. When he go Om, or put his tail in mouth and make perfect circle, I feel happy love vibration. But instead I see face of very handsome man. I from paradise, I have anything I want, and so I dive into water. As I dive, I break through membrane, and by some chink of fate on other side of paradise, man is googling www.paradisebride.org, and my face flash onto screen. He click, 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 and I break through to other side with a crash. Hello, other side. Oh, hello, man of other side. You want to marry me? If you marry me, I'll bring forth from me, Bridie, a breach so wide. I love you, my man, and I'll be your bride. With your prick in my brig, and so preggers I'll be. I'll raise up a child, and I'll breech it for me. I'll braid up my pretty hair, braid up my bread, and lay me there pregnant in my mother breed's bed. I'll bring forth from me, Bridie. I'll bring a child from my breeze toll. I'll sing, sing, sing. Yes, you marry me? Very good, because I bride. Da 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 da. We marry, and it's very good for about 3 weeks. And then I started to miss paradise. In paradise I'm very big, I wide as earth, I tall as sky. In paradise I speak every language, on other side only accent remain. The very worst thing, on other side I cannot hear my song of white snake, I cannot get happy love vibration. And so I have to leave man of other side. I run into street and I say, excuse me, skyscraper, have you heard song of white snake? And skyscraper, he speak to me. Before I was this skyscraper, I was a breeze block, and before I was a breeze block, I was a mountain. And in all the time it's taken to get from there to here, I've never heard the song of the white snake. But why don't you ask that newspaper fluttering down the road? I say, thank you. Thank you, skyscraper. Excuse me, newspaper, have you heard song of white snake? And newspaper, it reply, before I was this newspaper, I was a book of poetry. And before I was a book of poetry, I was a tree waving my branches in the breeze. But in all the time it's taken to get from there to here, I've never heard the song of the white snake. But why don't you ask that drop of water on the Coke can in the waste paper bin? I say, thank you so much, newspaper. And I go to drop of water on Coke can. Excuse me, have you heard song of white snake? And she reply, before I was this drop of water, I went through 7 mouths and 7 sewers, 7 seas and 7 rivers, and in all the time it's taken to get from there to here, I can honestly say I've never heard the song of the white snake. But why don't you ask the white snake? Because he's just there. And I look and I see that on the bench next to the bin is a half-eaten Haribo jelly snake. I say, excuse me, snake, have you heard song of white snake? And he answer, he said, don't be so stupid. Skyscrapers, newspapers, water vapours are all the song of the white snake. I don't like the snake. He not like my happy love vibration snake, but maybe I need to internalize him, so I eat him. And straight away I feel very hungry. I want to eat vodka, chocolate, plastic, holidays, but the more I eat, the hungrier I get. I have to leave other side. I run down to river, I mean to throw myself in, end it all, or get back to paradise. Water brought me here, maybe paradise I will find through water again. But just as I about to dive, I see very cold, very old hag. She have ringy eyes and blue nose. I say, excuse me, hag, what you do? And she say, I'm waiting here for the white snake, and when he comes up from the river, I'm going to squeeze his throat and get a drop of water for my sick child. I say, this is incredible. I too wait for a white snake. Hag, why don't you take my coat, be warm, and if snake come, I wake you. She take my coat, she fall to floor, she start to snore, and I'm not kidding you. Straight away up from lake come my white snake. He with his tongue and drop it on mine, and in that moment I understand what everything say. What roar of traffic, what water rat. They all say she must run because when hag wakes she will want that drop meant for sick child, and so I start to run. But she wake and she start to chase. I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna eat you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna, oh no, I wish I was a little sparrow, I could fly away, but I have taken off drop and I become little sparrow. But she become crow. I'm going to get you. Oh, I'm gonna eat you. Oh, I'm gonna get you. Oh, I'm gonna eat you. Oh no, I wish I was drill. I could drill my way back to paradise. And I become drill. Drilling in the water back to paradise. But I hit a pipe
and she sprayed me with river of shit. I'm going to get you, gonna stink you, gonna get you, gonna stink you. Oh no, I wish I was bridge across river of shit. I become bridge with a side, no heavy loads. But she does not read it. She becomes steamroller. I'm going to get you, I'm gonna eat you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna eat you. She smashed bridge into lots of little pieces. I become one piece of grain now. And I hide on crust, in loaf, in park, but she become pigeon. Peck, peck, hop, hop, keep on, don't stop. Peck, peck, hop, hop, keep on, don't stop. Gonna get you, gonna eat you. She swallow me down. I in belly of pigeon, but it is belly of earth. It warm, oh, sun warm me. I root, I shoot, I push up a stalk of corn in paradise. Wait, I see aeroplane trail. This still park, and coming towards me is hag. I know it's hag, even though she beautiful now. She have same sparkly glinty eyes. But I cannot run. I stalk of corn. She cut me, throw me. I land. I say, I sorry. I know I stole drop for sick child, but she say, don't worry. You were my sick child. Don't you understand? Everything is one. Paradise, the other side, hags, beautiful women. You know, we used to have a tradition around about this time of year. We would take a sheaf of corn left over from last year's harvest, and we would wrap it in the cloak of somebody that had a dangerous profession, like a fisherman or a storyteller who navigates the tides of dogma. And we would go from house to house, knocking on doors, saying, on your knees, open your eyes and let Brigit in. And if you wanted spring to come, you would say, she is welcome. Oh, she is welcome. May Brigit bless all who are here. Brigit the tender, Brigit the clear. Bright, bright maiden with hair of gold. Bless woman and man, young and old. Fire and flame, bless soul and name. Water and well, bless bone and cell. Heel and head, bless sheaf and bread.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sherry Robinson, the magnificent Sherry Robinson. We've been working together now for about 25 years. And this morning she said to me, do you realise that the Brigit's Cross on the wall where I'm being filmed is the same Brigit's Cross that we made in Kildare 5 years ago today? I hope you feel blessed, friends, by being here, because friends are what it's all about. It's something Fleur's going to talk about right at the end of the show. And 5 years ago, I went to Kildare with two very special friends, Julia and Sherry. Laura, can we see the pictures of Julia, Sherry and me in Kildare? And what we were going to do was find Solas Brida, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, which is Flame of Brigit, the centre of Brigit in Kildare, and go to the Holy Well and light a candle. If you could show a couple of pictures about the candles, Laura, for my mother, who was about to go on her last and longest journey into the unknown, and it was a last-ditch hope that she might be healed. So we lit a candle and then we placed it in front of the well in Kildare, and we sang a little song which goes like this: Hauen Malta Brida, Enyan Ila Heiran, Enyan Legatiri, Mola Mishkoleri, Lokren Galalaina, Sor Shafana Tiru, Kiaune Roya Teiran, Kiaune Manamina, which means Brigit, shining light, not just of Leinster, but the whole world, praise be to you. So that's quite relevant for tonight. And then we went to another very difficult to find well at the back of a car park, if you could show that please. And I cut a bit of my scarf off, and I think if you can see there on the branch there are those rags that you hang on branches over wells. And while I was there, a little robin came and perched on the side of the well. Can we see the robin there? Laura, thank you very much. And then he went actually onto the branch, and we've got a picture of him there. That's why you have friends accompanying you on pilgrimages. They took these pictures. There is the robin. And the robin is Brigit's bird because he's got a flaming red breast. So I would like to use the robin as my vehicle to fly now to Ireland with Clare Murphy, the magnificent Clare Muirheann Murphy, wonderful storyteller, and her entrancing shaman, to tell us more about Brigit.
Gur míle maith agat, Xanthe.
Thank you so much, Xanthe.
Fáilte live agus bannacht live go dtí lá féile bhríd.
Welcome and blessings to you all on Brigit's Day.
Clární mhuir cús anam dom agus isme se scéalaí.
Catherine Magуire is anam dom agus is mise banfasa.
My name is Clare Murphy and I'm a storyteller.
My name is Catherine Maguire and I'm a shaman.
We want to bring the cúpla focal, the few words of Irish there to greet yous. And myself and Catherine have been working together for the last 3 years, and we've been sharing stories and sharing shamaning together and sharing what we know and what we don't know. So over the next 20 minutes, we'd like to show you what Brigit looks like to us. 2 modern Irish women, one from the lens of story and one from the lens of shamaning. So if you're ready, we'll go. Brigit, wild, golden-haired goddess, saint and woman. And what I love about her is she is everything, multifaceted and multi-faced. And her stories are scattered throughout myth and history, and they've broken on their fall down. So you find these little tiny fragments scattered throughout story and history and place. Now Brigit is the daughter of the Dagda and the granddaughter of Danu, the great water goddess. So Brigit is a goddess of fire and of water. And she arrived in Ireland like all the great gods on the boats. They came on the boats from 4 great cities, and when they landed on Inishfal, the island of their destiny, Brigit knew she was home. Because Brigit, she stepped onto that wild land, and she is wildness itself. And soon she had 2 huge oxen that called her mother. And their names were Fea agus Féimen. And she had a huge pig, the Torc Triach. And the 3 animals would run wild around Ireland. But if anyone committed a crime, if anyone tried to pillage or plunder or thieve from the land or from the people, the 3 animals would cry out in their wild tongues, and Brigit, she would hear the cry and she understood it. And she would turn to where the animals were and she would find the criminals. She would bring her attention to those beings because she's a protector. But she's also a connector. Because Brigit was one of the fastest of all the gods and goddesses. When Christianity came to Ireland, Brigit moved swiftly from the pagan pantheon across to the Christian pantheon. Only the Christians say she was a human, a woman who became a saint. There was, in the 5th century, a woman, a slave, Briachsach, and she was carrying a pail of cow's milk. And she was just walking into her master's house, and there her waters broke. She had 1 foot in the door and 1 foot outside, and the waters wet the hearth, there the threshold at the door. And didn't she give birth right there, between worlds? And she caught that baby girl, that baby Brigit. And as soon as she looked at her, she bathed her straight into the cow's milk, that fresh, pure milk. So Brigit's first connection there to her own mother and to the fertility of the land. Well, it wasn't long It wasn't long before Brigit started feeling that call. As she got older, she felt this call to mystery, this call to God, this call to serve. She started telling everybody, I have such a life, she said. I have such a life ahead of me. I'm going out there and I'm going to serve what I hear. Now, women in the 5th century usually had a pretty set life. So her brothers and her father did what most men did at that time. They ignored her. And one day, Brigit, she came out of one of the sheds on the farm and she looked over and there were her 2 brothers coming towards her with a 3rd man. They called her over. So she ran, flicking her golden hair. And her brother said, there you are. That's your husband-to-be. She looked. She said, what? She said, I'm not getting married. I am far too busy. Do you know what I have to do in this world? And her brother looked at her. And he said, you are a pretty young thing. And we will fetch a fine price for you. So you're going to marry him. And she looked at her brother. And she looked at the husband-to-be. And she said, am I? Am I a pretty young thing? And the husband-to-be, he stood and he eyed her up and he said, you are. Oh, she said, thanks. And then she took her hand and while the 3 men watched, she brought her hand up to her eyeball and saying an invocation, she grabbed onto her own eyeball and she plucked it from her head, laid it gently on her cheek. And as the blood and the goo ran down her face, she looked at her husband-to-be and said, and am I pretty now? And he could barely stop the vomit coming up into his throat and he just ran. And she turned to her 2 brothers and they looked at her with the horror and they said, we won't try anything like that again. Good, she said. And with another prayer on her lips, she put her eyeball back in her head and she healed herself. Ready for the work ahead. Now, Brigit knew what she had to do. She had to teach and get a whole group of women around her because there's strength in numbers. And she found a great big oak tree up in Kildare in Kildare. And the oak is a great gathering place for magical things. And so she went to the local chieftain because there was a high king in Ireland, but there were also lots of little kings all spread out. And she went to the local chieftain and she presented herself with her long golden hair and she said, give us an old bit of land, will you? I have work to be doing for the great mystery, work to be doing for God, and it will make this land rich. It will make your people rich in their souls. The chieftain looked at her. People were always asking him for stuff. You had to be quick in Ireland. You had to think on your feet. So he said, oh, yeah. Because you could see other people were listening. He said, oh, I'll give you land. Yeah. I'll give you as much land as your cloak will cover. Will you now, said Brigit. And she started to unfasten her cloak. And as she did, she was saying a prayer. And she flicked the cloak out and she threw it into the air. And as it hit the air, it began to tremble. And the threads began to spread. And as the cloak hit the ground, it was as big as a field. And it began to tremble like a wave of water. And it began to spill over the next field and the next field. And the chieftain couldn't believe what he was seeing. He caught his breath. And now it was over 6 fields. He found his voice. And now it was over 9 fields. And he said, stop, please. You'll have all my land. Stop there. And Brigit did. And she said, I'll just take what's under the cloak then. And pulled the cloak back up. And then the work began in earnest. For Brigit, the woman, the saint, the goddess, wandering around, serving the sick, spreading the word. But she wasn't always welcome, my friends. She wandered as far as Galway in the west, and she was speaking her truth. And she was just leaving a little village when she felt footsteps behind her. And she saw a man with a heavy fist, and another walking behind him. So she picked up speed, and they picked up speed. And she began to run. And she didn't know the terrain, but she saw the road curving ahead, so she ran around it. And there in front of her was a great long beach. To her dismay, there was nowhere to hide on the beach. The beach was a long stretch of sand, the water, the oyster catchers, and that was it. And she ran towards the water, not knowing what to do. She saw the oyster catchers and she must have found her goddess voice, because a cry came out from her mouth like something wild. Something that spoke right to the birds, and she cried out, help. And the oyster catchers rose up, all 150 of them, into the air. And she threw herself down onto the sand and they started pelting her with seaweed. Sure, by the time the men came round the corner, all they saw was sand and rock and seaweed. No sign of a woman, and they ran on. And so Brigit emerged, taking the seaweed off of her, and she issued a blessing onto the oyster catchers, which they still carry to this day. And Brigit's like that. She gets everywhere in Ireland, but like Xanthe said, she gets everywhere in the world. There are some that say that there was a woman in the Middle East. Her name was Mary. She was on the run because they were going to kill all the boy children in Bethlehem and all the surrounding villages. And she had her child, she had just given birth, and she was running down the road and she called out to anyone who could hear her. She said a prayer for help. And she heard the sound of the soldiers on the road behind her. She heard them stop. She turned and she looked. And there between her and the soldiers was this tall, pale woman with golden hair. A tall, pale, white woman with a crown, with candles in the crown. And the soldiers never seen anything like it, and they stopped in their tracks. And Mary ran on and was saved. And she issued a blessing over her shoulder that Brigit would always be remembered. And so Lá Féile Bríd comes before Mary's Day, a whole day to remember Brigit, herald of the spring, goddess of the forge and fire, of poets, of wildness, of animals, a goddess who'll protect you if you ask. And that's how she looks from over here. But I'm always curious as to what you see, Catherine, when you look at her through your lens.
Claire. Thank you, Claire. So if you grow up in Ireland, Brigit is the goddess you meet very early on. You learn about her when you are a child. Unlike some of the other goddesses in the Irish pantheon who you tend to meet later, and some of them who you don't even discover about till womanhood. But Brigit travels with you through life. And because of that, for me, she is a goddess of initiation. She helps you cross the thresholds of your different life phases. And the thing I love about Brigit, and you get it from hearing Claire's story, she's complex. She's like a multifaceted crystal. So for me, she is this amazing mirror of what it is to be woman. All the different facets, all the different aspects, all the different colors and all the different hues. And you will see that tonight in the stories. And the other thing I love about Brigit is she holds and is the embodiment of opposites. So she is goddess and she is saint. She is the patroness of the wells and the holy waters. She is the patroness of the fire and the forge. And the amazing thing and the amazing ability we have as women, if we can hold opposites in our being, there is an amazing moment where those opposites come together and touch, and alchemy occurs. So for me, Brigit is the goddess of magic because she brings us the gift of alchemy and transformation. And I know this is a lot to take in. So tonight I would like to offer you an adventure. Come with me. Let me guide you and let me introduce you to Brigit so you can meet her for yourself and find out what it is she would like to say to you tonight. So I'm going to take you on a journey. I'll guide you there. I'll bring you home. But let's begin by closing our eyes. And as you close your eyes, I invite you to breathe. Breathe into your belly. Imagine your belly is like this beautiful bellows. And as you breathe in, the bellows expands. And as you exhale, that bellows contracts. And really gift yourself the breath. Gift yourself the breath. Breathing in, way down into your belly. And exhaling and letting it go. And when you're ready, with your eyes closed, I'm going to invite you to engage your imagination. And we're going to travel through space and time together. So using your imagination, I invite you to travel through space and time with me, and let's go to Ireland. Travel to Ireland on your breath, and when you get there, place your feet upon the soil of our ancient and green island. Fáilte, welcome. And I invite you to take a look around and notice that somewhere quite close to you, there is an ancient oak tree, and it's huge. Walk over there. And when you get to the oak tree, place your hand upon its bark and feel the texture of the bark beneath your skin. Maybe put your nose to it and smell it, or put your ear to it and see what you can hear. And start to walk around the trunk. And notice that as you do so, there's an opening, just wide enough for you to fit in. Slip inside, step inside. And as we are in the realm of magic, notice that it opens up into a beautiful cavern. And inside, tending to the fire and waiting for you, is Brigit. Diagat, God be with you. Fáilte, welcome. Make your way to her and breathe and take her in. How does she look to you in your imagination? How do you feel in your body when you stand here beside her? And ask her, why is she here? What has she come to tell you tonight? What does she want you to know? And when you're ready, if there's something weighing heavy on your heart, if there is something causing you worry, or if there is somewhere in your life you need help or healing, ask her for her blessing. Tell her what it is. And very gently, Brigit is going to place a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly. And as she does so, she is going to ignite her flame in your being. The fire of passion, of aliveness, of wildness, of truth and creativity, and knowing where you call home. The fire of sovereignty and celebration. And she will issue you with her blessing. I am the light. I am the keeper of the flame. I am the holder of the heart song. I am the bringer of the dawn. I am you. You are me. And we are one in spirit. Banachti, Banachti, Banachti. Blessings, blessings, blessings. And as you take that blessing in, she reaches for her cup full of her sacred well water. And she anoints you, pouring it on your head, your heart, your feet, and your hands. Welcome to the world of Brigit. Once you have met her, she will travel with you always. You will find her in the fire, and you will find her in her sacred well. But today she will leave you with a token, a snowdrop, for you to carry back to the outside world, so that you will remember this meeting and remember that when you need a blessing, she is the goddess who always answers your prayer. So very gently begin to thank her. and begin to take your leave, heading out through the oak tree, knowing that you can return here in another time, allowing the opening in the trunk to begin to close as if by magic, and feeling your feet once again upon the land. And then very gently become aware of your breath again, the inhale and the exhale. And as you breathe, use your breath like a magic carpet to help you travel through space and time, from our magical Isle of Ireland, back into your body, back into this moment, back deep into the marrow of your very bones, feeling your feet upon the floor, feeling your arms and your shoulders, feeling your head, your mouth, and your breath. And then very, very gently, when you are ready, opening your eyes and coming back to me. Is Mission Brigit. Banachti. This is my Brigit. Blessings.
Wow. Thank you so much, Catherine and Claire. That was pure alchemy. Ah, yes. I think we're going to go now to Wales. We're going to come crossing back over the Irish Sea and go to TAMAR ELUNED WILLIAMS, who is here now. Tamar, are you there?
Yes.
Hi. Well, you've been on that journey with us with Catherine, and we'd like you to take us now to Wales. Can you tell us about the lake where you filmed your story?
Yes, I can. So I filmed this a couple of weeks ago at the Punch Bowl, which is a lake in the Eastern Beacons. It's about 45 minutes from where I live in Cardiff. And the lake lies below a mountain which is called Blorenge, which is the answer to the question, what rhymes with orange, if anyone ever asks you that. It's a beautiful place, and I've been there many times, and I've swum there many times as well. But when I filmed this story, it was frozen, the lake was frozen, and it was very icy. It's beautiful.
And I know that in Wales, a lake is never just a lake, is it?
No, you're right. Lakes are often gateways in Welsh mythology to the other world, to the world that Catherine's just taken us to, actually. But in Welsh mythology, the other world is Annwfn, and it is just better than this world. It is a place of always summer. It is a place where people are always young. It is a place where you spend your whole time dancing and hunting and feasting. So it is a wonderful place that I'm sure all of us would love to go at this point.
Well, I'm sure in Annwfn there are storytellers like you telling stories like you're about to tell. So, Laura, could we go to Llyn Fan Fawr?
Amser maith yn ôl. A long time ago, there was a young farmer whose name was Gwyn. And he lived not far from Llyn Fan Fawr, down in the valley below, in a farm in the middle of nowhere. And it was hard living on a farm in those days. Gwyn's days were long, and to be honest with you, he didn't have much money. His father had died and had left him the farm, and he lived there with his old mam. And they didn't have much livestock, and sometimes the days were a bit hungry. And so even though Gwyn was only in his early 20s, he was still the kind of man who had learned a long time ago that he didn't have time to feel things. He didn't show anything on his face apart from stoicism. He rarely laughed, he never cried. And every day for Gwyn was the same. Every day he would bring the cows from the farm up to the lakeside at Llyn Fan Fawr, and he would let the cows stream themselves around the lake, and he would let them graze and drink from the lake, and then he would take them down to the farm at the end of the day. And this was every day, pob dydd for Gwyn, apart from maybe on a day like today when really the lake is too frozen to bring the livestock up. A nawr un diwrnod, roedd Gwyn yn sefyll wrth ymyl Llyn Fan Fawr, fel yr oedd e bob dydd. Ac oedd yn edrych allan ar draws y llyn, And that was when Gwyn saw something he'd never seen before. Ni fi ferch eriod cyn lynaf, ni fi ferch eriod cyn wynaf, dyna gan I eto. Somehow, there, on the surface of the lake, there was a woman standing. Ni fi ferch eriod cyn lynaf, ni fi ferch eriod cyn wynaf, dyna gan I eto. And Gwyn, he walked closer to the lakeside, and he stared and he stared and he stared, but no, there was definitely a woman standing on the surface of the lake. And his heart began to pound in his chest, and he stared at her as if his eyes would never be filled with her. Her hair was a little damp. Her feet, as they rested on the surface of the lake, barely made a ripple. And her eyes were exactly the same colour as that deep, dark lake water. Well, Gwyn reached into his pocket, as if in a daze. He reached into his pocket and he found in there the small lump of burnt bread that his mam had given him for his lunch. And he held it out to the woman in the centre of the lake. A sa'n gwybod beth oedd yn disgwyl I ddigwydd, but her eyes flashed at him and she said, "Cras dy fara, nid hawdd fy nala. You of the burnt bread, you're not having me." And then she disappeared. Gwyn, well, oedd e'n gyffrous iawn. He'd never seen anything so exciting in his life, and his heart was pounding in his chest. He felt a bit sweaty. He did not know what to do with himself. He gathered the cows. He went back down to the farm as quickly as he could. When he got home, he said to his mam, "Mam, wneud ti byth ddyfalu beth sy 'di digwydd I fi." "Oh," said his mam. "Oh, did you see her? Did you see the woman from the other world? Did she come to you at Llyn Fach?" "Yeah," said Gwyn. And then that's when he opened his mouth, and it was as if the words just appeared fully formed on his lips. He said, "Dwi'n ei charu hi." I love her. Well, his mam, she'd heard all these stories. She'd heard stories for years about the woman from the lake, and, well, she knew. There was nothing she could do if her son had fallen for her. The magic had happened. And so she said to Gwyn, "I know what you need to do." And the next day, when Gwyn went up to the lakeside with the cows, in his pocket, his mam had put a piece of uncooked bread, a piece of dough. And Gwyn stood by that lakeside at Llyn Fach for the whole day. He was staring at the centre of the lake, waiting expectantly for the woman to appear again. He could not stop himself from getting so excited. And the sun rose high in the sky, and it moved over across the sky, and it started to go down the other side of the mountain, and the shadows were lengthening. A dyma Gwyn yn dechrau meddwl, oedd hi'n mynd I droi lan. But then, suddenly, Ni fi ferch eriod cyn lynaf, ni fi ferch eriod cyn wynaf, dyna gan I eto. There she was. Dyna lle oedd hi yn sefyll. Ar arwyneb y llyn fel oedd hi o'r blaen. Aeth Gwyn I lawr at ochr y llyn, ymestyn oedd hi fewn i'w boced, tynnu allan y darn o does, ymestyn y mas iddi hi. A dyma'i llygaid hi'n fflachio eto, a dyma hi'n dweud, "Llaeth dy fara, ti'n I fyna," a diflannu. And this second time when she disappeared, Gwyn felt a lump appearing in his throat, something he'd never really felt before. And he put that piece of dough that she'd rejected back in his pocket, and he went home. He walked home slowly, the cows trailing out for miles behind him. When he got home, he said to his mam, "Nath ddim gweithio, mam." But his mam, she knew these things. She said, "Gwyn, pai ti a phoeni. You've got one more chance. Try your best." And so the next day she sent Gwyn up the mountain with a piece of half-cooked bread in his pocket, a piece of bread that had been in the oven for just a few minutes. Dyma Gwyn yn sefyll wrth ymyl y llyn am oriau, yn syllu allan ar draws y llyn, ble oedd hi? And the sun rose high in the sky. Aeth I lawr ochr arall y mynydd, dyma fe'n dechrau oeri, dyma fe'n dechrau tywyllu. And Gwyn's heart sank in his chest and he thought she's never going to come. And he started to gather the cows together. And he started to walk them away from the lakeside. And that's when he turned and he looked back at the lake, and there, standing on the surface, was the woman. And this time he walked slowly to the lakeside. He wanted to preserve that moment. If that was the last time he could see her, he wanted to make the most of it. He reached into his pocket, he took out that piece of half-cooked bread. Dyma hi'n gwenu. A dyma hi'n dechrau cerdded ar draws arwyneb y llyn tuag ato fe. And as she approached him, Gwyn, he drank in every sight of her, the line of her body, the sway of her hair, the flash of her eyes. And when she got to the lakeside, she reached out her hand and Gwyn took it and she stepped onto the bank. And as her feet connected with the earth, he felt a little shudder go through her. And Gwyn, he could not even summon the words, but suddenly they appeared, fully formed on his lips. He said, "Dwi'n dy garu di. I love you." And she smiled. She knew this would happen. It happened every time. And she said, "I do not even know your name. Who are you?" "Gwyn," he said, "fy enw yw Gwyn a pwy wyt ti?" "I am Nelferch," she said, "and I am the daughter of the king under the mountain. Why have you called me out of the lake?" "I dy briodi di," said Gwyn. He was 100% certain marriage was the only thing he could ask of her. That's all he wanted in his whole life. "I dy briodi di," said Nelferch. "Well, yes, I will marry you. But I will marry you on one condition, un amod. If you ever give me 3 causeless blows, if you ever lay your finger on me 3 times in anger, I will leave you." Fi wela ynys cynno, fi wela lan yr afon, fi wela lan yr afon. And the water of the lake started to ripple, and something started to come up out of the water, 2 pairs of horns, great muscled shoulders, a snorting nose. Fi wela ynys cynno, fi wela lan yr afon, fi wela lan yr afon. And out of the lake came a huge bull, pure white. And he raised itself snorting onto the bank and then pushed his nose into Nelferch's hand. And Nelferch, she held her hand very briefly to its neck, and she spoke his name, the animal's true name that would bind the animal to her. And then she raised her voice and she called out over the lake again, "Fi wela pentre Aberdar, diddlara, diddlara. Fi wela pentre Aberdar, lle gwrag ar fy nghalon." And out of the lake came rising a whole herd of white cows. And Nelferch, she touched each of them as they came out of the water. She spoke their true names. She bound them to her. A wedyn dyma Nelferch yn troi yn ôl at y llyn yn codi ei llais unwaith eto. "Fi wela ynys cynno, fi wela lan yr afon." And out of the lake, allan o'r dŵr, daeth defaid, a whole flock of sheep, so pure white that Gwyn's eyes hurt to look at them. After the sheep came pigs, and after the pigs came goats and chickens, until finally a huge farmyard was arranged around the edge of the lakeside. And with this huge array of farmyard animals, Nelferch and Gwyn made their way down from Llyn Fach down to the valley to Gwyn's farm. A dyna lle, dyma nhw'n byw gyda'i gilydd. That's where they lived with each other. They lived with each other, they were married, and they loved, and they laughed, and they were joyful. They had 3 sons together. One year, and then one the next, and one the next. And Nelferch's life, it became very full indeed, full of love. And Gwyn, well, he felt things he'd never felt before. He found smiles appearing on his face. His heart beat fast when he looked at his wife. Oedd e fel petai oedd hi ddim cweit yn gwybod sut I bihafio. People in the local village of Myddfai, they looked at her funny when she went walking past. Her hair always seemed just a little damp. Her eyes were the same colour as the eyes of the lake up on the mountainside. They spoke of her, they whispered. "Dath hi o'r llyn," they said. "She came from the lake. She's not of us. She's not of this world." Dwi ddim yn gwybod beth mae hi I fod dynol. And so as the years went past, Gwyn and Nelferch spent less and less time going to the local village, taking part in local events. They spent most of their time on the farm at Myddfai. And the farm grew, and it grew so rich and it grew so wonderful, and their young sons grew up and began to run in the fields. And one day, they were invited to go to a wedding. Nelferch didn't really know the family and she didn't really want to go, and she was taking absolutely ages to get ready. And Gwyn was becoming more and more frustrated with her. Why didn't she realise that it was rude to be late? Why didn't she realise that people expected certain things of you in this world? It was like she didn't care about anything apart from the feel of the wind on her cheeks and the sun on her face and the rain in the trees. A dyma fe'n cerdded nôl am lan tu fas I stafell wely y ddwy ohonyn nhw. Yn y diwedd, ath I fewn i'r ystafell, and there was Nelferch, and she was sitting in front of the mirror and she was combing her long hair. And Gwyn felt frustration rising in him. It was more than frustration, it was anger. It bit hard in his belly. He strode up to his wife and he tapped her hard on the shoulder. He said, "Dera, come on, we're going to be late." And Nelferch turned her face to her husband and she said, "Fy nghariad, dyna oedd y tro gyntaf, that is the first time that you have laid a finger on me in anger. Dyna yw'r ergyd diachos gyntaf, that is the first causeless blow." And horror rose in Gwyn. It replaced any anger that he'd been feeling. His eyes began to prickle. He turned to his wife, he said, "I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again, I promise, I'll be so careful." So a few years later, Gwyn and Nelferch were invited to go to a christening. And the chapel at Myddfai was filled to the brim with laughter and smiles. But as Gwyn and Nelferch sat there in the congregation, Gwyn felt the hairs on the back of his neck start to rise, and he realised that people were staring at him. This happened quite a lot with his wife next to him. Ond dyma fe'n edrych ar Nelferch, and he realised that his wife was crying. She was just crying, the tears rolling down her cheeks yn llefen fel oedd ei chalon hi'n torri. She could not stop herself. People were starting to stare and whisper and nudge each other. Who cried at a christening like this, like the world was ending? And Nelferch was crying because she knew that that baby was going to have a short and painful life. But Gwyn felt that same anger begin to rise in him. And he tapped his wife hard on the shoulder. He said, "Pam wyt ti'n crio?" And Nelferch turned to her husband and she said, "Fy nghariad, that is the second time that you have laid your hand on me in anger." And a few short weeks later, Gwyn and Nelferch were invited to go to a funeral. Just as Nelferch had known, the baby had a short and painful life and died of illness. And the chapel at Myddfai was filled with tears. Pawb yn crio. Pawb wedi torri eu calonnau nhw. But Gwyn looked at Nelferch, and it was like he'd known. She was laughing. She was laughing. She couldn't stop herself. The tears were rolling down her cheeks. She was belly laughing. Her head was thrown back. Well, she was laughing because she knew that that baby had gone to a better place. She knew that that baby was joyful and calm and loved in the other world. Ond oedd pawb yn syllu, everyone was staring. And Gwyn felt that old anger rise and burn bright, and he tapped his wife on the shoulder. He said, "Pam wyt ti'n chwerthin?" And Nelferch turned to her husband and she said, "Yng nghariad, dyna oedd y trydydd ergyd diachos." That was the third causeless blow. And nawr, dwi am dy adael di. And Gwyn felt that his heart broke at that moment. But there was nothing he could do. She was out of the chapel. She was running. She was running up towards the mountain. And Gwyn followed her. All he could see of her was her hair streaming out behind her. She ran as hard as she could, and as she ran, she raised her voice and she called all of those animals' true names, the animals that she'd brought out of the lake with her, all the horses, the cows, the sheep, the pigs, the great white bull and the great flock of cows. They followed her. Up the mountain they streamed with her, up to the lakeside at Llynefan. When she got to the lakeside, Nelferch took off her shoes and she began to walk over the surface of the lake. And when she reached the centre of the lake, she turned back to Gwyn. And Gwyn saw her, and her eyes were the exact same colour as the lake. And he thought that maybe she was crying. And then he realised that he was crying. And then she was gone. Wedi diflannu'n llwyr, I fewn i'r llyn. And it is said that Gwyn followed her in there, just a few days later. And that they are once more together below the water, Llyn y Fan Fach. But it is also said that Nelferch, that wasn't the first time and only time she came out of the lake. She came out many, many times. She came out to speak to her sons. She taught her sons all the magic and the herb lore that she knew. And her sons became the first doctors of Wales. They were known as the physicians of Mythology. And their knowledge and their healing spread out across the whole of the land, just as the water from her lake spread out down into the earth to enrich the seeds that at this time of year are preparing to grow for the spring.
Oh, fabulous. Tamar ELUNED Williams, that was absolutely gorgeous. Was that you and your sister swimming across the lake?
Yes.
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Tamar. I'm going to move swiftly on now. We're going to go from the healing goddess of Wales, the water goddess, the Lady of the Lake, to another healing goddess. Brigit has many healing wells and many manifestations and emanations, so let's hop across the Bristol Channel and go to Bath.
So here I am in the city of Bath, outside the pump room. It's shut because of COVID, but according to legend, this city was founded upon contagion. There was once a prince called Vlatulf, which means wolf lord in the Welsh, but we'll just call him Wolf. He was the son of King Hudibras and Queen Who Knows, because the mythographers didn't give her a name, but we'll call her Mother. And one morning she called her son to her and said, "Wolf, last night your great-great-great-grandmother came to me and told me you're destined to give your strength to Sulis." "What?" he said. To be honest, his mother's goddess terrified him. According to her, Sulis's body was the earth itself, her eyes its deep wells, and her energy coiled like the rivers that snake across this land. "How could I possibly have enough strength for Sulis?" "I do," said his mother. It was true. In all weathers, she sat outside, freezing cold, blistering wind, tending the flames for Sulis. "Imagine you're strong and you'll be it," she told Wolf. "How imagine? Look, Sulis is the sun. These flames are her heart. Follow them skyward and fly, and in your imagination you'll find your strength." But he couldn't fly. His father sent him to Greece to study philosophy, mathematics, astronomy. He studied hard, but still he was uneasy because he couldn't find a way to fit Sulis into his mind or into his heart, until one morning he climbed up a rocky outcrop in Athens, and at the top he found a temple, and in the temple a statue made of olive wood with sapphires zoned with crystal for eyes, and hair that was a mass of writhing snakes and flames. "Sulis," he said, and fell in love in a blink. The Greeks called this goddess Athena, the Romans Minerva. But he knew this was Sulis in a shape he could relate to. So he bought a little statue of Sulis-Minerva and strung it around his neck, and as he took the boat home and flexed his muscles in the spray, it seemed to him that the waves bowed. Once home, he and his mother greeted each other in the customary fashion by becoming animals, honking like geese or like bulls, and in the rough and tumble of being pups or kittens, she touched a lump on his arm and he yelped. "What? Wait." She started to inspect his body and saw that he was covered with the lumps and lesions of leprosy. She tried to heal him, put poultices on every sore, breathed in the illness, caught it herself and died. King Hudibras locked his son in a high house to prevent the contagion spreading, but he couldn't be constrained. The pain in his heart meant that he had to get out, so he climbed through a smoke hole, dropped his princely robes, put on rags, became a swineherd, going from freezing rock to dripping tree. He loved the pigs. They didn't seem to mind his leprosy. They were covered in scurf and bumps and lesions themselves. One day he felt a fever
rising over his body, so he just steadied himself and sat under an oak as the pigs went careering down the misty valley and began to bathe in mud. But then he lost it and went into sleep. He came to every so often with his pigs around him. He would stroke their backs, and it seemed to him that they were clearing. He went into a deep sleep and had a dream that his mother was running, the pigs were chasing, he was chasing the pigs, and they all fell down a pit. And as they fell, his body began to crumble like bread. "Ah," he said, "I get it. This is how you take my strength, Sulis. The ants will eat me." But as his strength seemed to ebb and his flesh fall, his mother was grabbing bits of darkness and slapping it in his dream on his body. "What are you doing, mother?" "Mud," she said. He woke up saying the same word, looked at the pigs, down at the valley, went slipping and sliding, and as he approached the pool of mud, he saw that it wasn't mist above it, steam. This was a bubbling, hot spring. But it was still all muddy, so he went inside and stretched, wallowed like a pig, leant against a rock, and as his necklace snapped. "Sulis-Minerva!" He tried to get it back from the ooze, but felt as if in reply a vibration. And behind him, he pulled out rocks and stones, and through the gap, gushing, came a great torrent of water. And as it hit him, this hot, steaming water, it seemed to him that his strength was now Sulis's. Sulis's was his. They were one in the water. He bathed for days, and when it was clear that he was totally healed, he lit a fire in honour of Sulis, his mother, Minerva, the sun, the earth, its wells. And as he watched the flames, for the first time he was able to fly in his mind's eye. And while he was up there, he looked down and imagined that around that steaming pool he would build a town. And when he landed, he took his finger and he began to draw in the shallows of the mud his own face, wreathed with snakes and flames. And if you come here when these COVID days are over and go to the Roman baths, the first thing that you will see is that image that he drew in the mud of himself, wreathed with snakes and flames. His strength, Sulis's strength. Sulis's strength, his strength. Because Sulis is one of the fire goddesses, the water goddesses, the snake goddesses of Britain, sometimes known as Brigantia, sometimes known as Brigit. So we do need all those healing water goddesses at this time. But going back to Brigit, if you make a Brigit's cross, and I've got one here, before you start working with the reeds, you're supposed to bless them with holy water, and that's fine in the Catholic Church. I think they have fonts of holy water. But if we're talking about the goddess Brigit, what kind of water do we use, should we use? So in answer to that question, let's go to the Centre for Implosion Research in Plymouth. Thanks, Laura.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your mission with water is?
Well, water is fundamental, and therefore one has to respect and revere it. This is called the Triskelion pendant. This image is on a Neolithic rock carving just outside Dublin, just 5,000 years old.
So here we are in the Centre for Implosion Research. Can you tell us something about your jewellery here?
The most important thing about them, they're all water filled.
Right.
It's tubing, it's copper tubing, and we filled the imploded water. The imploded water has structure and vitality to it. And when you fill it in these shapes, when you wear it, it is interacting with your body fluids at a cellular level.
I see. So what do you mean by imploded?
We built an implosion machine. It's egg-shaped, and we put water in it, and we turn it very, very fast. Mostly centripetally. That seems to be important because it's more the female energy, it's the nurturing energy, is what all of us needs. And that seems to take on the structure and the vitality that all of us need in water, which we have removed by doing very silly things, adding chemicals, putting the water in straight pipes instead of meandering like a natural river. Me coming from India, we revere and respect water. In the East and the West, we abuse it. It's as simple as that. So water for us in India is the elixir of life. Our bodies are more than 70% water, our brains are 95% water. This is a watery planet. Everything is about water. Everything is about water. And if we do not respect that, we will end up actually killing ourselves. And that is exactly what we've done with everything, with the foods that we make, the water that we drink. We are not actually copying nature or working alongside nature, which we should be, because we are part of nature.
Yeah. So, Dolly, first of all, could you tell us a story about your grandfather when you were 2 and how he stirred his water?
Yes. I remember visiting him. He lived 206 miles away from me. He lived in Madras and I was in Bangalore, and my father took us there. And I remember watching him stir his water. I thought he added sugar in it or salt in it, and he didn't. And he stirred, and I wondered why he stirred his water. Unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to ask him why he was stirring his water. 50 years later, I knew exactly why he was stirring his water. Because by stirring it, you're putting the spiraling motion back into the water. And you can still do that and not buy any of our products, but you have to remember to do it every time.
Yeah.
Because the charge doesn't last. If you stir it and drink it immediately, then it works. Do you like me to douse for you?
Yeah, why not? Will the COVID vaccine work?
I've got yes.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you, Dolly.
Thank you.
Well, let's hope it does. And so I think we've got our answer there about what we do if you want to bless the Goddess Brigit's cross. So I've got a glass of water here. I'm just going to stir it. And then I'm going to flick it on the Brigit's cross. There is a video about the Brigit's cross and how to make it on my Facebook page. It's sometimes hard to find the reeds, so I've made some recycled ones here. This is made out of plaited plastic, and then there's one out of a birthday bag because it's Brigit's birthday. And we're going to have a little competition, if anybody's up for it, of making Brigit's crosses. And the prizes will be for the most original Brigit's cross, the most exciting one, or the most heartfelt one. And one of the prizes will be this book by Bernadette Vallely, which is called Your Planet Needs You. And it's basically a Bible, a compendium of what we need to be doing to look after the planet. Lots of stuff about water in it. And the other one is my book, Goddesses and Symbols, illustrated by Alice Patullo and published by Thames and Hudson, with lots of symbols at the back. So we've come to the end of the evening, but we've got one final fantastic guest who really is going to bring together all the themes that we've had tonight very, very bravely. She's going to bring together goddesses from Greece and UK goddesses. She's going to descend, she's going to ascend, and she's going to bring us her own particular brand of healing. So can you welcome FLEUR Shorthouse, please?
Brigit is the fire goddess. Smith, goddess of wisdom. At Imbolc she brings forth the infant sun. Last year, I was diagnosed with DCIS. That's when you have cancer cells in your milk ducts. And after an operation, it turned out I had stage 1 breast cancer. But it was okay because after the second operation, the lymph nodes were clear, so I didn't have to have chemotherapy. But I did have to have radiotherapy. I had 5 sessions over 5 weeks in April in lockdown. Thank you, NHS. My sessions only lasted 10 minutes. What you do is go down to the cancer centre. It's best to go with somebody else. And you go into this great big room and get up on the couch. And there's an enormous, benevolent, gentle, terrifying machine. And the radiographers, they draw lines all over your chest and boobs, and then they leave. And if you dare look, the robot, it's a robot by now, with consciousness, looks at you with its great flat orange screen face. And if you dare look inside its face, you can see the cogs of its brain eyes looking at you. And they twirl and pinpoint, sterilizing, healing rays at you. And then you go home. Mistletoe for love. Blackthorn for dark power. Hazel for clarity. I'm pretty sure that I was told that a week after you've had the first treatment, it's working more intensely in you, so that over 5 weeks it all builds up. I was having some strange feelings, and I mainly felt like I really needed to be out of the sun. And then the day after my last treatment, my neighbour was in the garden. It was under lockdown, and she called me over to the garden, and I stepped into the light, and as I did, I felt a shock on my face and a power run through me. To be honest, I think it was probably just a menopausal hot flush. And if it is the case that such a radiant, powerful, dark light goddess exists, fully equipped with all of the properties of omnipresence and omniscience and omnipotence and omnibenevolence, if she does exist, and if she has that ontological status of actually being part of reality, and if it's the case that human beings can know that reality with a mere human faculties of knowing, I reckon I experienced that in that moment, in the sun. I spent a lot of my healing time playing with stories, and look, I made a little Venus of Willendorf. Not sure you can see her in this light. If you look carefully, you might see that she's only got one breast. Luckily, I got to keep both of mine. But how do we story this? How do we story that women, for the first time in history, are having so many breast operations? How do we story for the healing of word and emotion and body and spirit? How do we story for this? Well, I haven't got very far, but Demeter was the harvest goddess. But the thing that she loved more than anything was mothering her daughter. And then one day, her daughter Persephone disappeared. Demeter was so distraught and so angry that nobody would help look for her that she closed down the whole of nature. Not even this worked. And she fell into a despair. She fell down next to an old dried up well and vowed that she would not move from that place. And it was at this point that she had a visitation from Balbo, the little belly goddess. They call Balbo she who speaks from between her legs. And she has eyes where your nipples are. And she sniffs out wisdom with her belly nose, with her little nose, which is where your belly button is. Demeter felt Balbo's hot breath on her ear, and when she looked up, Balbo spoke to her and cajoled her just enough so that she would stand, take Balbo's hand, and walk to the house of Hecate. Now, Hecate is the crone goddess. She always has a clean and cosy hearth, and she welcomed the two of them in. And she combed Demeter's hair, and she washed her hands and washed her feet all the time, listening, 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 and nodding, and laughing at Balbo's disgusting jokes. And the next day, Demeter realised what she had to do. Balbo is goddess of obscenity. She reminds us that when we're depressed, we seek out our female friends and we laugh about our bodies, our ridiculous bodies and what they do with each other. And if breasts are being removed, how do we learn to see in the dark? How do we tell this story? How do we grow our breast eyes back? These are my questions. I think there's something there to discover, but I'm not quite sure what the story is yet. I feel like I'm a blind man on the right road.
I think the right road is the method I might use to work with story and healing. And for me, one of the places these things come together is in the sauna. The night before my first operation, I had a gig booked down at Beachbox Sauna in Brighton. It was the winter solstice. My friend Jonathan did a beautiful fire ritual, then I stood there, cancer in breast, and told the story of Eros and Psyche. There is one part of this story that I clung to during the cancer healing process, and it's this bit. Psyche, the princess, in trying to win the approval of the Queen of Love, Mother Aphrodite, has to go into the underworld and beg for some beauty potion from Persephone, who has become the Queen of Death. Psyche makes her way down to Dis, where lie the breathing vents of hell. She squeezes through into the tight, hot cave and follows hell's breath down, 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 down. Finally, in the gloom, she sees 6 red lights. They're the eyes of Cerberus, a gigantic, terrifying, angry dog. She feeds him cakes and slips through the gates of hell, awash with gloom and misery. She made for the ferry dock. Chiron was there. She paid and he ferried her across the river Styx. She ignored the cries of the poor wailing souls in the water beneath. Past the Isle of Medusa and right to the other side, she stepped out, walked straight, and found herself travelling across the poppy-filled Elysian fields. It was beautiful, tranquil. She saw a group of philosophers there under a tree, locked into dialectical reasoning, and there were comics weighing jokes. And then in the distance, the palace of Hades. In the gardens, she sat beneath a pomegranate tree, plaited her hair, and put up her yellow hood. And in through the wooden doors, to a vaulted hall covered in bats. Vultures perched behind 2 thrones. On one, grim Hades. On the other, Persephone, who kindly filled her cinnamon box with beauty preparation. She left, eyes lowered, and made her way back. Over the fields, another coin for the ferryman, and the dog slept as she slipped through the gates. She focused on the pinprick of sunlight and up, 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 up the stony path, up, until she burst out of the cave, heart beating into Helios, the sun's shining rays. And as I told this story of down into the underworld and back up, I saw a hopeful journey for me, and the vision of stepping into the light helped me when they put guide wires in me, when the anaesthetist put me to sleep, when I got bad news, when I got good news, when after it all I realised that it wasn't over, for I had to heal and convalesce and recuperate and accept that I was changed. And as I told my story, my sauna sisters passed around scrubs and face masks and lovely unctions with scents that reflected the aromas in the story. Beautiful birch sauna whisks for healing. So I've got conditioner on my hair from this shell, and I've got face mask on, and now a little aloe vera gel into a salt scrub. Now, I always wonder if salt is the base note aroma for Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire. But she comes from the sea. And when she stepped on land for the first time, flowers and grasses sprang forth from wherever she stepped. So I think above that base note of salt, it must be rose and orange blossom and geranium that we smell. And I found this all to be incredibly healing. This combination of wood and flame and stone and steam and leaf and word. These simple elemental pleasures and the idea of them carried me all the way through the whole bloody lot of it.
Wow. Thank you, Fleur. Thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to say to anybody who may be starting a similar journey to the one you've just been on? About the support networks out there, or
Well, I felt that the NHS were there absolutely for everything physical, and the Macmillan Cancer Charity were there for everything else. The healing of absolutely every single part, from emotions and counselling and energetic healing for spirit, and all sorts of opportunities there with the Macmillan Cancer Charity. So they were amazing. They healed all the other bits. Yeah.
fantastic. Now, as if you haven't done enough with all the wonderful scents and words and stories, I know you've actually got something to show us, haven't you, as well?
Oh yeah, it's just that I think something that was really lucky for me, I guess, was that I had time to nurture my friendships. It was a bit like being an adolescent again and having time to be able to see my friends. And one friend ran a pottery painting cafe, and so she got me to go down there on Tuesday and do art therapy. And so I made a cake stand, and this is a picture of many images that represent the Eros and Psyche story. And then on the underneath, you can go underneath, and then there's the river Styx, and here's the river banks, and there's the Elysian fields. And then under here, if you can see, there's two thrones in a back vaulted ceiling for Hades and Persephone. So that was just a little bit of fun.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Well, happy Brigit's Day to everybody when it comes on February the 1st. Please do make some Brigit's crosses, whether you share them with us or not. And may the light come in good and strong during these difficult times, and may the door of spring swing wide open. And please come next month to Gender Blending Goddess with the fantastic Alex Etchart and Amy Sutton and Alia Al-Zougbi, and Fleur's waving her birch there to tell us that it is the birch full moon tonight as well as the wolf moon. And we will be sending surveys out. This is very important for Arts Council, so if you do have a moment, we'd really appreciate it if you'd fill them in. Yes, and give us honest feedback by all means. We really want to let these sessions build up. There's a network of 21 strong performers, and we're going right the way to June, and next month will be completely different. Each month will be its own thing. But for now, just thank you so much for coming, friends, and thank you to the Friends panelists here. Thank you so much again to Claire Muirhean Murphy, Catherine Maguire, Sherry Robinson, TAMAR ELUNED Williams, thank you, FLEUR Shorthouse, Dolly Knight. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.